tell you the story about my dad, the story that he told me when I was a boy, and it was about when he was a boy, and he came into contact with ball lightning, is what he called it. Also, some folks call it a will-o'-the-wisp. But what it is a light that seems to just materialize and float around and then disappear. He played football for his little high school in rural Pickens County back in the 1940s, and he was at practice one night, and it ran late or it got dark or whatever, and his friends that he would usually hang around with were gone doing something else, so he had to walk home by himself, and he had to walk home about 6 or 7 miles out into the country from the school on a dark night with no moon. So he wasn't really scared of the dark because he grew up in the country, but it had him on his on his toes. So he starts off walking, and it's a dark night. He's got out of town into the country roads, and he noticed behind him what he thought was somebody carrying a lantern, because it was bobbing along, moving at about chest level, about 100 yards behind him. So he thought, all right, well, here's one of these fools from school trying to scare me or something, or it's somebody just walking out trying to find a dog or something. So he didn't pay much attention to it, kept walking, but the light followed him. And after he walked about a mile, the light was the same distance behind him that he had first noticed it. So now he's thinking, I'm not sure what this thing is. So he'd stop, and the light would stop, and he'd walk some more, and the light would move some more. And then he started kind of really focusing in on it, and he saw that this light is bigger than a lantern and brighter than a lantern would be. And he started to think, maybe this isn't a lantern. So he walked a little bit more, and it would move again, and he'd stop, and it would stop. So he decided to take off running. He ran as fast as he could, thinking that, well, if it's just some old man carrying a lantern or something, they won't be able to keep up with me. He ran about a mile. And when he stopped and turned around, the light was the same distance behind him, about 100 yards, he estimated. So then he started to get a little worried. And he got a little scared. And he would run and stop, and doing this over and over again to try to mess up the light, but the light just followed him. He said it kind of bobbed and floated, and it was about 5 or 6 feet off the ground, and not swaying back and forth, just kind of following around. And he eventually hooked up his courage enough, he said to himself, I'm going to go towards the light. I'm going to find out what this thing is. So he starts walking towards the light, and he doesn't really get much closer to it. And then he starts running towards the light, and he sees that he's actually getting closer to it this time. But when he got within 20, 30 yards of it, the light just went out. And he ran to where he was close enough now, he could see where that light had been. He ran to it. There was no footsteps. There was no smell like you would have with a gas or an oil lantern. There was no sound of anything. It was just gone. And at this point, he's completely freaked out, and he's still 2 or 3 miles away from home. So he takes off running, and he ran the entire way home, told his dad, my granddad, about what he had seen and what had happened, and I call him Pawpaw, his daddy, my granddaddy, just told him, oh, that's just ball lightning. You see that all the time. Acted like it was nothing big, but that was the only time he ever saw it in his whole life. And it's the only time I've ever heard anybody telling a first-hand account about being followed by ball lightning or a will-o'-the-wisp. And that's